right, we're back. What do you think?
We're
Back in action on a Friday, and we have a lot to talk about today. I'm kind of excited about it. What about yourself?
Yes, we have. I think we skipped a week because we had the Game Time Tech Pod, and things have been so busy. So yeah, a lot to talk about.
Great. So let me do a little bit of an intro. This is more Insight and Strategy Hot Desk podcast. This is, I think we're on episode 33. I'm Robert Kramer, joined by Melanie Brue. We're both vice presidents and principal analysts. I handle ERP and enterprise data. Mel handles modern work and HCM and CX. On the show, we talk a lot of about some great stuff and tools, trends, trajectories, and people and marketing technologies, enterprise apps, ERP, CRM, glue that holds it all together, which is data. So this year, we're going to be this week, not this year, we'll be talking a
So
little
this
bit about we're going to be talking a little bit about Ring Central, talk a little bit more about Zoom. We have some earnings to talk about. Supply chain Canada had a little bit of a railway issue, ERP and the vulnerabilities with that, Webex. And coming up next week is the US Open. We'll talk a little bit about Mel and I and what we will be doing at the US Open and IBM with their technology. But let's talk a little bit about our disclaimer, then we'll get started. The show is for information and entertainment purposes. While we'll be talking and discussing publicly traded companies on this show, its content should not be taken as investment advice. So let's jump right in with Ring Central.
Yeah, all right. So Ring Central this week announced some updates to its contact center solution, RingCX. So a couple of things, native real-time AI assistance for agents and supervisors, which includes AI-based coaching and feedback tools. They also reported a big, like substantial growth in their RingCX customer base, which is just in its first year. They had a virtual event to showcase their AI capabilities within RingCX, which is really interesting because one, they did it on their Ring Central events platform, which they acquired about a year-ish, maybe more ago, from Hopin Events. So interesting way, I think, great way for them to highlight their events platform, also highlight their new announcements. But then they used this event they had Blake Morgan, who's the CX author, what they call her a futurist, come on and talk about the importance of customer-focused leadership. So I think it was a really great event because they had customers, they had Blake, and they had some of their leadership, including their chief innovation officer. And what it did was it wasn't just an announcement and more AI, like everybody has AI, right? It was a way for them to combine the product announcements with the thought leadership and this practical application of the Ring Central solutions, meaning they had their customers on to actually talk about how they're using this. I need to actually use our little there. I always forget to change that when I'm talking. So I think it was a really smart move to showcase the product updates alongside the practical advice on how to leverage them for the customer experience, but then, kind of the little like subtlety of doing it on the Ring Central events platform made it even better. I was a little bit surprised to read a news article that on Yahoo News that somebody said that they stumbled on this announcement. I don't agree with that. I think that everybody assumes that all AI is the same, and it's not.
Good point.
And RingCX, they've used it in a sales environment. They're using it now in a coaching environment, and in different ways. It's not just an AI assistant that's going to answer your questions. It's actually taking a lot of data and providing it's almost like providing a not an assistant, but a really valuable tool that gives people back time to concentrate on the actual customer service. So if you just say like, oh yeah, everybody has AI in the contact center, sure they do. But this is different. And so take your time to actually look at what it is that they're announcing and what the
Yeah.
capabilities are. And so maybe that's, you know, that's an opportunity for RingCentral to be a little bit more clear on what it is. And sometimes that's the issue with a press release, is that you can't tell the whole story with just a press release. But I don't think that I don't agree with the thought that that's a stumble. Because if you look at the success of, let's say, you know, RingSense for sales, the what they're able to do with like actionable insights for sales teams is way more than what you could do with just an AI assistant. So,
Well, it's
but
in the data, right? So they've done a lot of preparation behind the scenes to have that data management set up to be able to exercise what you're talking about. So maybe they need to talk about what they've done in the, in the background to set this up. That's why it's successful. I
right,
think that's a big deal.
it is, and that's the thing, is that you know, like I said, not all AI is equal, um, and so if people just think like, oh yeah, you have AI, well, it's not just a chatbot.
Right.
It's more than that. So, but I did like the combination of the orchestration of the event and the announcement and all of that. I think was really done well and helped to kind of tell that story. So, whoever thought they stumbled obviously didn't get all the pieces of that, in my opinion. But yeah, that was their big news for the week, and also, you know, like I said, so a pretty big amount of growth in their customer base in that first year. So that shows that people are adopting it and adding it to their current. So this is new, both new logos and add additions from current customers who are adding it to the capabilities that they already have. So they're saying, okay, we see the value of this, and we want to add it on. So
Sounds great.
good information
And
there.
then, and somebody else that you wanted to talk about had a pretty good quarter as well with Zoom.
Yes, and actually, as we're talking about contact center solutions, Zoom they had really strong Q2 2025 results, and it was on the stock market their best day in almost 2 years. So they beat revenue and earning expectations and raised its full year guidance. And this is really important for Zoom right now, because it comes at a time that the company is expanding its product portfolio beyond its what it's been known for, which is the video platform. And it's really heavily invested in AI to reignite that growth, which kind of stalled after the big pandemic boom. Big growth drivers in that have been lower customer churn
Hmm.
and a really growing contact center business. So I think this shows a really, you know, promising future for Zoom beyond its video conferencing roots. They're trying to do a lot of things, you know, with Zoom Docs. I think that's a little bit confusing for people because they think it's something like Google Docs. There's a lot of things I think that Zoom still that has this people still don't really know about. One which I love, which is Zoom Scheduler. Um, if you're a Zoom user and you're not using a Zoom Scheduler, you're missing out, because it
What does it exactly do? Because I think, like, not to interrupt you, but Zoom is branded as a video conferencing, right?
yes,
So it's challenging. I don't know if you look at Adobe 15 years ago or what, how do they get out of their core competence to grow in other areas that they're already branded pretty heavily? Because Zoom was one of the pioneers of this, right? WebEx obviously before that, but they have been one of the mainstays of, I guess, a better interface. It works well, et cetera. So what is Scheduler? How do they brand it a little bit better so people understand beyond?
yeah, and I think, you know, they had a good thing going with their brand as a verb. You know, you say like, oh, let's Zoom, right? Because but that's the video solution. They have so much more than that now. Even we've talked about before in our sports tech vertical, they use their contact center solution for their replay center for MLB. That's one way that they kind of communicate to the world that they're more than just video conferencing. Their infusion of AI, I said this a few months ago, that Zoom's AI investment in AI should not be underestimated. And this was something, they introduced their Zoom AI companion and they gave it away for free. And I think there's something that happens to people in sort of a mental way that says, if it's free, it must not be worth much, right? Um, and so I don't know that people really paid. So great, it's free. That's awesome. I mean, if it's free to paid users, so it's at no additional charge, is what it actually is. Um, but it works really well. And if you have used it, it does great meeting summary. But just picking up, if you going to their events and everything, I'm like, just based on sheer hires alone, you can tell that they are investing heavily in AI. And I made a post about this on LinkedIn, and I was like, Zoom's AI investment should be taken very seriously, and that's really starting to show. And I think that's one of the things that is sort of driving a lot of their growth, is how much they're investing in AI and the types of things that they're doing. One thing I'm going to say before we kind of end this is they did announce the departure of their longtime CFO, Kelly Steckelberg, who is adored by all, in at least in the industry. Sad to see her go. She is planning to stay on, so which is a good indication that it's a very friendly departure. I'm planning to stay on until the end of Q3 earnings, and as they look for her replacement. But sad to see her go. She was a great, great CFO, and also did more than that. She was in charge of a lot of their real estate and other, just a big, very important part of the leadership, and just a great person also. So
Well
um,
said.
loss for the company, but big gain for whoever's getting her. I believe she's going to a startup or something, so I'll be
Well,
excited.
good for her.
I'll be excited to watch that. So, yeah, we'll move on from that. But great
Great.
quarter for Zoom. And I didn't. Oh God, I thought I changed the thing. I'm not on it with my
So we'll
machine.
go to Zoom and then we'll touch base now on supply chain. So if you think about the global supply chain, and it's interesting because there was a disruption the other day, but if you think about that global and how we get a lot of the goods and services that we're getting in the United States, it's because they're able to get products from all over the world. Even when cars are manufactured, some of the parts come from different parts of the world. So when there's a shutdown or disruption, it affects globally. So like COVID was a big deal from the pandemic. It caused a lot of supply chain disruptions. The tsunami in Japan. Every year, the Chinese New Year causes a problem because China shut down for a month. The hurricane in Katrina, SARS outbreak, but anything like that can be a very, much of a ripple down effect. So the other day, two of the major railroads in Canada, from the Teamsters, 9,000 people went on strike. It was only about 17 hours, but I think they kind of tallied it to be about $1 billion of loss per day if this went down. About 30% of the United States goods that come from Canada are through the railway. So um, I wrote a little bit of a LinkedIn blurb on this, but there's an enormous amount of goods and services that flow through from Canada to the United States from the rail. So it was rectified, but the point is that these supply chain disruptions are a big deal. I don't think it's talked about a lot, but a lot of the goods and services I mentioned just a few minutes ago, they come from different parts of the world. That's why we're able to get some of these things less expensive because of the fact that they're flowing. But if you remember when COVID happened, if you bought something, 3 years before that, then you bought it after COVID and it's the same product, do you think it's exactly the same fit or does it look the same? Chances are they used a different supplier because they had to change
Right.
all their supplier network. So it's a big deal when these go down. A lot of people don't talk about it because it's not a huge concern of theirs, but behind the scenes, if this would have went through a long period of time, it would have would have made a major impact in the United States economy because of the fact of it being so close to us and the amount of goods and services that come from Canada through the railway. So it was actually the government of Canada that resolved it. So they intervened, made a mandate for an arbitration, and I think the Teamsters weren't tremendously happy about it, but the impact in the United States would have been just gigantic.
So you probably mentioned this in your post, but what was the biggest issue that they were?
It was finance. It was the union workers disputing over labor, and I'm assuming not that I know exactly what the labor issue was, but it was benefits and pay, and probably a few other things. And they got it resolved through arbitration. But generally, these unions are just very difficult to work with, and they're demanding. And it's one of those things where um, they have a lot of weight that they can pull by going on strike, but at the same time, it's detrimental to so many people. But it was strictly labor. So of all the people that went on, it was only 9,000 people. So it wasn't a tremendous amount, but it was enough to cause a huge stir. There's more than two. I think there's three or more railways, but these were two of them, and these were the major ones. So it was a big deal. The names of them are the what is it? The Canadian National and the Canadian Pacific Railways. So those were the two big ones, and it was a big deal from that perspective. But I thought they would have been down a lot longer than they were. So
sounds good that they had a quick resolution on that.
Yep. Okay, so let's move on from there. Let's talk a little bit about ERP and what necessarily can happen if you're not actually doing your updates or your upgrades, and what happens if you do them and something could happen with that. So recently, SAP actually had a big update, and there were some vulnerabilities that were exposed. SAP, this was this month in August, they did a great job of fixing them, but at the same time, the vulnerability was at a pretty high scale. They caused issues where the hackers could actually penetrate, their system. But SAP did a great job of going through what was needed to be done to actually fix these vulnerabilities. But what's happening is these hackers target these ERP systems, and it's a big deal for them to actually be able to hold them from a ransomware perspective, and they're major targets just because of the substance around them. But at the same time, what is being done, for companies that don't actually do these upgrades. So it's kind of double-edged sword. So my point is, these upgrades are necessary. At the same time, you have potential risk. So when you install an ERP system, when you get it good, you kind of take like a deep breath. You're like, okay, we're good. And then all of a sudden an upgrade comes out and you're like, I don't want to do it. But if you don't do it, you might not get the latest, AI opportunities, or you might not get the latest, things for IoT integration or e-commerce, or you might not even have the new tax rates because of the fact that you didn't do the upgrade. There's new products and services all the time. So these products and services allow your company to grow, and et cetera. There's new regulatory issues, and it's an important component of this. But if you're not doing it, you're vulnerable. So my point is, this happened, and what is the choices that these companies have to do it? So I guess the bottom line, my suggestion at the end of the day, is to make sure you do the updates, do the patches, but have the staff on-prem to make sure that you're able to handle these issues. And SAP did a great job of handling that, because they did have some vulnerabilities. They caused some serious issues, but at the same time, they were fixed and they were there to support their customers. So.
No, I mean, when we think about like the CrowdStrike push, like everybody said, why didn't they test this in an environment? Explain to me why that doesn't happen in the ERP environment.
Well, so that's a great question. So the problem is, everything's not made equal. Okay, so when you have these ERP systems, they're all using it different. It's not as clean as it appears to be. So when you have a patch or an update, it might affect the company a little different, and it could cause a ripple down effect that could cripple the company with an update or a patch, or it could be just beautifully done. But the selling point is, it's kind of both ways. The selling point is, you want the features, but the companies that are the ERP companies, they need everybody on the latest releases from a support standpoint.
Mhm.
So if you have a customer service center that's supporting 15 different, versions, it's impossible. So you need everybody to be kept up. You need, is be able to handle the problems when they occur. So it is tested, but it's not tested for everybody's situation because I think what happens is it's bastardized on the side of the customer, and maybe the ERP vendor doesn't always know exactly what they did. It's like you go to the doctor's office, like, what medicine are you on? You're like, well, I'm only on these couple, and then you don't tell them the other four, whether they can't help you out. So right. So they can only help you with what they're supposed to help you with. It's very complicated, but that's why my suggestion is have the team on staff at your site, stay on the latest releases because ERP is modernizing today, and so is supply chain. And if you don't do that, there's an enormous amount of features you're going to miss out, and you won't get the support. But you will have bumps. But you're going to have bumps if you don't go to the latest release because you're not going to take advantage of that technology, and your competitors will leapfrog you because they're doing it.
Mhm.
But
It's so interesting when, like, I think I sent this to you yesterday. It's that really interesting thing about data management, and we had when we had assistants, people still have assistants, but not the way that the secretary who would file documents, and how, like, now we have such a problem with documents and bad documents and everything because there's not a human in the loop to say, like, this is no longer needed, I'll shred it and get rid of it. We just have all this garbage, which is making our AI work harder and
mhm,
more garbage, right? That was the whole point of that, which I think is so fascinating, and we should talk about that in more detail another time. But I think with these updates, and I don't know enough about ERP, that's your TED Talk, um, but with these updates on a global scale, I remember just, I'm old enough to say this, like, when we first started having these types of, like, technology updates, we would do them kind of rolled out, and we would do them at night when people weren't
mhm,
online. Well, now that's not possible because it's like this global update, and there's no time when things can be off, and so there's
mhm.
so many more vulnerabilities. I just find that fascinating, and that's not my TED Talk, that's yours.
Well, there's a lot of reasons to also stay up to date because there's security patches, there's um, so it's beyond just the technology. It's everything that would help you to do move goods and services. It could be regulatory, it could be like I said, the taxes. I mean, there's all this new technology that's constantly coming out. The AR, the VR, the IoT, these these companies that are trying to transform and modernize, they can't do it without staying up to date. But when I was in the ERP business actually selling, and we would actually do these updates, companies we would schedule them at certain times, and they would actually have teams over the weekend. We do like it on Friday night, and they would actually test over the weekend. So then Monday they were up and running and live. But it was pretty common for companies to have problems, but they knew it going in, and they knew that they wouldn't get supported. And I think that that's, if you look at like SAP and their RISE program, that's one of the things. Some of these companies are like, you know what, we're fine. We're not going to, go through and upgrade because it's too complicated. But those are choices, and we've talked about this to death in the past. But I think that the ERP is so complicated. There's a lot of variables here, but the vulnerabilities are just going to exist, especially with the hackers. So let's move on to WebEx. I'm happy to talk about that with anybody, but it's exciting for me. So what's going on with WebEx and their AI?
So Webex, their AI codec, they just announced general availability of the AI codec in the Webex app. So this enhances the audio quality during online meetings and calls, even with bad network conditions. So obviously, audio still is one of the most important aspects of collaboration, and it's a really significant part of making meetings the best experience for
Mhm.
employees and customers. So the company says that the technology can deliver clear audio while using minimal bandwidth. I actually saw this happen last year at Webex One. This was last October, and it's pretty crazy to see. You almost have to experience it, to be honest, because you can see like because they showed it, and you see the actual codec and the packets. So it's an AI speech codec. So the core technology is like this AI codec that maps the raw audio samples into speech vectors. So,
Wow.
and they're trained on all this speech data. So then they're compressed so that so say like if we're talking and I all of a sudden, it will somehow figure that out and fill in
Oh, wow.
that packet loss. So it has this built-in redundancy, and it allows the decoder on the receiving end to like reconstruct those lost, they call them audio frames.
It has to happen often.
Of course. I mean, think about the number of times you miss little pieces and you're like, oh, you broke up. Sorry. Can you say that again? This
Yeah,
codec actually will kind of reconstruct those packets that were lost and then reconnect them. So that happens even when packets are dropped due to like network loss. The codec also has some enhancements that are incorporating like, noise removal, correction of like microphone noise and things like that. So it's clearing like those distracting noises and everything, but really cool to see it come actually generally available because I saw it almost a year ago now. If you have a chance to look it up and watch the actual the visual demo of it, because you can see where the voice is dropped and how it
hmm
fills in that packet loss. And you cannot tell that it's the AI filling it in when you're just listening.
that's
Um,
unbelievable. Is the voice continue, or what? Who does that gap?
so the AI, it's trained on just a ton of speech data. So the AI figures out how to fill that in, and it sounds exactly. It somehow picks up that dropped word
That's
or sometimes several words. And so I like this, from a sort of equal, let's say, equal opportunity standpoint. Because if people are in areas where they don't have good bandwidth, even in countries where they don't have good bandwidth, but they need to communicate with the rest of the world because they're doing business in other areas and whatever, these types of solutions connect people. I mean,
hmm
I just had a call, was it earlier this week, where Cisco is doing a lot of connectivity work with AI and AI upskilling in Africa. This is the type of thing that puts that stuff in action where there's only so much you can do if people can't communicate. And so if in an area where there's low bandwidth or not enough network, there's a way that people can actually still have conversation and communicate in a way that's not just choppy and broken up. But the technology behind that, it's complicated. Honestly, I had to like do some work to to learn it completely.
Sounds
Um,
fascinating.
but really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really
And
surprised that
nice.
they've gone that far, but it's necessary because as we get to the world of virtual becoming more prevalent, the quality needs to be improved, the technology needs to be improved, more capabilities need to be there, and I think that's what we talked about with Zoom and
Right.
right now with WebEx. I think those are key to that happening.
Yeah. Virtual and global. And I think it's also kind of going back to that like say thing. And there's so much of this hype around what AI can do and what people had announced in the kind of the hype cycle of AI. And so to see the things coming to market and coming generally available is that sort of proof point of it wasn't just the hype. It's now actually, it's happened. It's here.
That's fantastic.
Go check it out. All right. Speaking of AI.
Well, one of the things that's going on and it has gone on is IBM demonstrating their technology in sports and a new level of technology in sports. One that we've never seen, but we've been covering it. We've been talking about it on Game Time Tech. So, what do we have going on, and what should we tell everybody?
Well, I'm very excited to be at the US Open next week, and that you will be there as well. I
Yep.
was very lucky to be at Wimbledon, and I can't remember, you were somewhere really important, so it's not, that wasn't why you weren't there,
I
but
was I was at Amazon's summit for analysts, so pretty significant, but probably not as fun as what were able to do. But I had a good time too. I have to
no,
say that.
definitely not Wimbledon, but okay. Yeah, so I think many of the same technologies used at Wimbledon, and we had that article that we wrote about that first appeared in Forbes and is also on our More Insights Strategy webpage, with some of the technologies. So very excited to see all of the things in action. Also, some of the operational things that they do in Flushing Meadows. I want to point out something I think actually is so cool, which is the IBM. They're saying tennis and AI making winning teams. So they're using tennis to teach, I assume, kids or young people, basic AI concepts by using tennis. And if you can, we'll put this in, it's in the show notes, but IBM's skills build, they have several different learning modules where you can explore AI and take all of these courses, including getting certifications that are free. But they have one that on exploring AI modules, and you can learn AI prompting with IBM Granite on Watson X. There's all of these things, but it uses a tennis lens to do this. So I love this for young people. And I don't think that you have to be a tennis fan either. I think just tying it to sports, my kids play baseball. I think just being able to tie it to sports and for young people in this sort of this need to upskill a whole generation and make sure they understand the importance of AI literacy, these types of ways to attract new tech talent, I think is so smart. And also, I think it's just it's a great thing to do. And I showed my kids, and even not being tennis players, they're like, oh, that's cool. Like, more interesting than being like, or learn about AI models. They want to learn about AI,
Of course.
but AI.
It's a win-win, like you said, for everybody. I think golf and tennis are a little bit more interesting with the technology to showcase the fan experience a little bit better. Just like what you're saying. I mean, you could see through like the Slam Tracker this year that IBM has, that it allows the fans to have more insights on the matches and the win predictions. It'd be interesting for us to track, who they're predicting to win and if they actually win. But it's also great for IBM with their technology. It's great for the fans because of what I just said, but it's also great for the U.S. Open because they're able to have the data and be utilized. They're able to have the ball tracker and the shots if they're in or out. They're able to have a lot of these this information for them as well. So it's kind of like a three-way situation between the fans, the U.S. Open, and the technology sponsor. So it's really exciting, and to be there, what we're going to be able to provide, back to the people that we are going to be that we'll be writing about and talking about is our in-depth analysis and what we're going to see beyond this conversation.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'm excited for you to see, which I saw at Wimbledon, is the whole kind of underbelly of the operation, which is a room full of people who are entering all of the data and all the screens and the things that we can't actually show, but we can talk about. which is just the vast number of data points that go into building these experiences. And the way that then translates to how can IBM do this for business? It's not just about tennis, right? It's about showcasing their technology. And so it's a great way for people to experience that through tennis or golf. And I think the interesting thing about that is that, especially with golf, there are very intricate things about golf, language, culture, things that are very specific to golf that those models have to get right in order for the experience to be right. More so than tennis, I would say. And that's another opportunity for IBM to showcase that technology, that it can do specific things in verticals like finance or HR or whatever vertical, healthcare, let's say, where it can get granular on that level of specificity. I hate that word. For a particular industry, and showcase how that technology works. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. So,
well, it's a good point, because I think for AI, like going back to what you're saying, for it to work, data has to be in order. But the translation is what you're saying, that it's showing it, casing it in the environment of sports is just like showing it in manufacturing or healthcare, and understanding what it could do. But it still will not be full-fledged without the human intervention. And I think that allows it, like you were saying before, it can't work successfully 100% without someone who's able to say, hey, shred this or do that, because then it fine tunes it, unless the models could be fine tuned to that level where the data management is such an exercise where it's at that level that you don't need as much human intervention. But I always think you need it. Someone's got to be able to make that decision that's more gut reaction, because a lot of times that person on site can do that. Anyway, we're gonna have a good time, and we're looking forward to it. And we'll, behind the scenes, we'll be able to see, like you said, how much it takes to get that engine running from Watson, and it'll be exciting, the Watson X platform.
Yeah, well, I'm excited because the next time I see you, it will be in New York City. And the next time we see all of you, we will be on our next podcast or the Game Time Tech podcast. But thanks for joining us. If you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe button. If you didn't like, or if there's something else you want us to talk about, please hit us up on Twitter or X. It's X now. Get with the times. Come on.
We're trying.
We love feedback. We love to know what you like, what you didn't like, what you want to hear more about, what you want to hear less about. We want to hear it all. But thanks for joining us. I'm Melody Brue. This is Robert Kramer for more Insights and Strategy, Hot Desk Podcast, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.